Hey guys, Professor Bell, Comic Book University. This is a blizzard going outside, so if you hear noise, that's what it is. In the meantime, Black Knight, King in Black, Black Knight, King in Black, Black Knight? I don't know. This is a one shot, but it's going to lead into an actual series. I'm going to get into all that good stuff. I'm going to explain why I didn't not like this comic book. There's a really weird love-hate relationship where I'm gonna have to go into a deep dive into the character of the Black Knight in order for you to really understand where I'm coming from. Anyway, let's get talking about the comic book itself after we give credit where credit's due. So Cy Spurrier is the writer. Simon Spurrier. I liked it when he was just Cy. What happened to Cy? Cy was cool. Simon is like, whatever. Reminds me of the guy from freaking the America's Got Talent show. Jesus Saez does the art. VC's Corey Petit does the letter. Dan Mora and Tamara Bonvillain do the cover, and there's some variant covers and yeah, all that good stuff. So anyway, this comic book just makes the perfect sense in the world, right? They're big, giant, gooey dragons, and it's really all it. It's all the King in Black event really is, right? It's like they're giant, gooey black dragons that are attacking everything. Oh no! So, like weren't there Celestials also? Yes, and at one point they turned their heads. I guess, since Celestials usually don't move and they would just, turn their thumbs up and down and that would be the only thing that they would do, I guess turning the head is like a really big event. Anyway, so yeah, that's a thing that happens, and there's just basically dragons everywhere. Here's this guy, Null, with the big sharp pointy teeth, like the freaking killer rabbit from Monty Python's Quest for the Holy Grail. Freaking, he goes around, he's like, oh, there are lights everywhere, and I will destroy the lights. I will put out the lights because I am the light killer. All the little lights, die, lights, die. So there's basically just an old dude going around blowing out candles down the hallway. That's basically what this event is. Am I wrong? Did I summarize it appropriately? It's another one of those giant events where it's like, oh, there's things, and we don't know how we're going to defeat the thing. And then the end, the thing gets defeated, and it's like, it didn't really make a whole lot of sense to begin with, and a largely forgettable event, just like all the other events. What do we have, like 3 events per year? And that's just the major ones. Yeah, I really just don't care about events at this point. But when you got freaking dragons flying around all over the world, you'd figure at least one of them is going to come by the Black Knight. You know what I'm saying? So, yay, makes sense. I'm glad they did a one-shot of the Black Knight. Problem is, it wasn't just a Black Knight story, and there was a lot of missed opportunity here, and that alone could have made this comic book better, in my opinion. We start off with a Black Knight saying, I've got to attack this dragon because it's a dragon and I'm a knight and I got a sword, so bleh. And then it goes back to how he got there, and then it goes on to what happened afterwards. So this is really asynchronous, which usually is a little bit frustrating, but it's a good one here because it tells you what's up. The problem is it gets silly, and right away you will always lose me. Pretty much 100% of the time when you start doing silly. I don't want to read Slapjack. I'm usually not a huge fan of Deadpool. It is what it is. You're going to lose me when you make serious characters, especially into silly characters. When Dane screams out, dragon, ow, you bit and bent my butt plate. Really? He wouldn't call it a cursus. Or the pantaloons, nothing like that. He would call it the butt plate. Really? So yeah, that doesn't exactly fill me with a whole lot of anticipation for this being something special. Did the knights who sat on their horses, like on their steeds, did they have butt plates? I find it very interesting, questioning how were they able to sit on the saddles appropriately. Like, was there a groove? Was there greaves? That's what the pants are called. Pants are called greaves, not the cursus. Cursus is on the top. Anyway, so I just don't understand that. Say butt plates. Sure, there's butt plates, and they were just bent. That's what saved his butt from being bit. The dragon tried to bite his butt. Sure, why not? Let's just make this a totally silly comic book. So Sir Percival shows up and he's like, how we got rid of this stuff with Thor, but we're gonna keep it here. Yeah, sure, that's fine. I wonder if British people found this funny, because British people have a humor that I don't understand. There was the anniversary of the Queen, the birthday of the Queen, and you know how Mr. Bean celebrated it with the world? He got into a little mini car and just started driving all the way around in a big circle in front of the place where the Queen lives and stuff. And it's like, the people were like cheering and laughing, and he's, the Mr. Bean thing. He does the face, and he's like, and when he's going around, and it's like, I remember my British bud when I was in Dammam in Saudi Arabia. My British bud was just talking about, like, it was the funniest thing in the world. Oh my God, we were dying. We were watching on TV, and the people, I wish I could have been there live for. I was like, so what do you do? He was just driving in a circle. Like, I don't understand. How is that funny? He's like, it must be British humor. Humor. I can't understand why you don't understand. Like, it's so funny, but it must just be a British thing. I'm like, it must just be a British thing. And I'm not judging. Like, I'm really not. But yeah, humor is very different over there. Is Cy Spurrier British? I don't know. Is he? Can he go back to being Cy? Just Cy Spurrier? Anyway, he did the Shadow comic book, and it was freaking great. I loved it. I wish he would have kept going with it. And he was Cy Spurrier then. Now he's like, I'm Simon now. Sure, sure. The freaking America's Got Talent guy. So, so the humor, I guess, that's here, like, it's supposed to be ironic, but then it comes back later on, which is like a callback, but not in a funny way, in a much more grim, a more serious way. Sir Percival is the most onerous and patient person amongst them. He's just like, you hurry up, get over here. And it's like, he doesn't seem very patient. So it's like, here's these stories of people who are supposed to be these, and these things, but it turns out they're nothing like those things. But that's not really the case. That's not how this is supposed to happen. Plus, Dane here is a guy who is so weak-minded that the ghost of his ancestor has to read his text messages from Tony Stark activating him. Like, he can't figure it out himself. Like, it's off his cell phone now. They don't use the Avengers card anymore. I guess it's just an extra piece of machinery, right? It's usually the Avengers card they'll activate and be like, oh, we need you to do such and such and such. Auxiliary members, let's go. And no, that's not the case anymore. Now the ghost has to read it because Dane is an idiot. He goes out there. I like that there was at least the mention of the horses being clones, the winged steeds being clones. I like that. He does actually make those because you wouldn't guess it, but Dane Whitman is actually one of the smarter characters in the Marvel Universe. No, he's not one of like the top 10 or whatever, but he's in the top 20. Absolutely, he's in the top 20 of the earthbound heroes of the Marvel Universe and whatnot. He absolutely is. In fact, back in the old Avengers comic books, when Tony Stark left the team, they didn't have a scientist, but Dane Whitman joined. And he was a geneticist and a biologist and an engineer, and he had all these incredible skills to go by, and he easily filled the shoes of Tony Stark. Again, is he as smart as Stark? No. But he does have multiple degrees, and he knows multiple areas of the sciences. It was he who actually figured that sounded so prim and proper, right? It was he, in fact, who figured out Monica Rambeau's powers and the extent of what she's able to do. So I mean, hello. Like, this dude knows what he's doing, but you wouldn't be able to tell that by here because he's just a freaking idiot. And mind you, Cy Spurrier isn't the one who made him an idiot. He's just writing him the way that he was left off by a bunch of other people who wrote Dane Whitman to be an idiot. And I'm not here to blame anybody and to point fingers and say, you guys suck. They were trying something. They were trying to do something that just, I don't feel like it was meant to work. Look, I get it. A lot of people didn't read the Avengers comic books back in the day. But honestly, those people who didn't read those Avengers comic books, they're the ones who missed out. The only thing I think that really took people away from the Avengers comics is that, unlike all the other team books that are out there, the teams were constantly changed. Like, sometimes within an issue, you'd get multiple team shifts of membership in the Avengers comic book. You know what I'm saying? Lots of storylines that were that were just never finished for the most part because a team member would just pick up and leave all of a sudden. I get it. That is one of the things that could be a drawback for the Avengers. It could also be an allure, but it is what it is. Almost like a Marvel team up or a Marvel 2-in-1, except on a team level, So, I understand why a lot of people wouldn't want to necessarily get invested, but there were so many incredible stories in those comic books, especially back in the day when Lee and Kirby were doing that. Mind you, Dane Whitman, Lee and Kirby creation. Hello. Can we be a little bit more respectful to these characters? Can we recognize that this is actually a legacy character? This is probably the first legacy character in the Marvel universe or in any of the comic books period for the most part, aside from like the Starman situation. Because aside from retconning a character or making a new character with such and such name, I mean, the Black Knight, Sir Percival, was actually a character. And he was around for a good long time. And they decided to resurrect him, but not as him, but as a modern day version to still have the sword and sorcery stuff, but to put him in the Avengers books, but to update him by being a very smart scientist guy, you know? I mean, hello, isn't that enough for this character? Isn't that enough? This character who, if he does happen to lose his ebony blade, he could pull out a lightsaber. No, 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 I'm serious. He actually used a photonic stun, uh, what do you call it, lightsaber thing, you know, a light sword, laser sword, whatever, in order to fight against the bad guys for a while because the blood curse on the ebony blade. I mean, there's so much there. And in here, he loses the sword. He starts freaking out. He starts blah 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 blah. You're wondering who's narrating this. You realize that he's actually narrating this as a crazy person. It's no surprise that later on in the comic book he's associated with who actually shows up in this. It's fake. Did I just turn right to the page? Yes, I did. Go figure. Like, you got Shumagorath in here, which is supposed to be like Marvel's original version of Cthulhu. I mean, really. You've got who else shows up? Oh, there's Khonshu. Hello, from the Moon Knight. You've got who else shows up? Well, there's Null. I don't know who this is supposed to be. I guess it's supposed to be like Conan. It looks like Conan. Anyway, you got what's his name over here? Sidorak actually shows up. And this is that Chiru guy from the Swordmaster mythology and whatnot. You got all these different characters showing up, like to emulate the idea that this dude, Black Knight, he's actually a little bit crazy. But who else shows up in this comic book? Arrow shows up, and she's just really there to moderate between Dane Whitman and the other person who shows up, and that's Swordmaster. And this was such a great idea to have Swordmaster in the comic book. Unfortunately, they're both acting like idiots, and the only person who's actually intelligent and able to figure things out is Arrow. Arrow felt really out of character in this. I like that they had her flying and everybody's like, oh my god, it's Arrow. She's so amazing. Because that's exactly what I would be saying, because it is an amazing character. Wasn't really written that way here. It was very much like, yeah, here's Arrow and she's the only intelligent one. Meanwhile, here's this dumb kid, Swordmaster, who's always screwing things up, which I get. But then here's Dane Whitman, a character that's been around in the Marvel Universe for a really freaking long time. And at the very least, you know, considering Marvel's sliding timescale, well, he's been around since the beginning. I mean, practically since the formation of the Avengers. So why we fronting? Why we acting like this guy's an absolute idiot? Again, he was written that way for a while because people just weren't that creative and whatnot. But a whole issue like this, I don't think that this worked. Now, what could have been cool is if instead of calling this the King in Black Black Knight, how about King in Black Black Knight and Swordmaster? That could have been fun. Because this way, even if you have the skeptics who are just like, oh, what the hell, they're going to combine these two witches because they both have swords. But if you put down, what is their connection? What is the connection between their swords? Even the biggest skeptic who's going to be like, oh god, they're going to combine them and whatnot, they're going to be like, okay, but I got to read it. I got to read it though. The book sells itself. Anybody who sees that, for the most part, is going to be like, I got to see what they're going to do here. Because this is something that's going to be monumental. Right? Here they only hint that there's some kind of a connection. I wish that they would have gone a little bit more into it, but I'm okay with that. Let's just see what happens from here on in the new comic book. Now, do I actually want to read the new comic book? Right now, probably not. So to me, I think it only makes sense that you've got the most noble of heart people in order to make a sword work. But this issue right here, yes, this issue that I'm reviewing is a major retcon to the history of the Black Knight character. Kirby and Lee are spinning in their graves right now and conspiring to murder Cy Spurrier and whoever approved this stuff. I'm not saying anything, I'm just saying, don't make death threats. That's stupid. Hopefully any of the comic book university alumni are at least a little bit smarter than that. I mean, I give you guys a lot of credit. Don't make stupid death threats. God, please don't do that. all things being what they are. The idea that this gets retconned to say that no, it's actually the darkest souls that work. A character with a good soul, the sword won't work for them. It's only a character with a darker soul. I can understand if you're going to try and go with the Elric of Melniboné style here, the Michael Moorcock style of the evil sword. I am so in love with that idea. And it makes sense since both swords are basically star swords. I don't remember exactly the history of Swordmaster's sword. I know it's something they don't have the full history of, but with Black Knight's sword, it was a meteor that came down that Merlin found and he fashioned into a sword and then gave it to the most honorable person because he was the only one who was able to resist its bloodlust. That made sense. But now retconning saying, no, 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 only the evil characters can use it. Only people who have blackness in their heart. I have a problem with that. I have a problem because it eliminates the entire history of the character. You know what I say that sometimes storylines in the Avengers wouldn't be finished? One of those storylines that wasn't finished was when Namor joined the Avengers and said, hey man, I'm going to face the fact that Atlantis attacked the Earth, because that's all Atlantis ever does. They attack. Atlantis attacks. We're going to attack the Earth, the surface world, and boom, 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 boom. I'm going to face United Nations so that I can explain, hey, it wasn't my fault, and you got to understand this is why it happened. So they said, okay, cool. We'll schedule a meeting with the UN. And then he goes and says, yeah, sorry, I'm not actually going to be here. I'm going to go and try and get, the poom poom with that Plot X chick, Marina, from Alpha Flight. So I hears you. And hey, never let me be. I'm not one of those guys who are like, bros before hoes. No, 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 no. I understand the necessity of hoes. You know what I'm saying? But hoes should be a temporary thing. You come back with the bros. You know what I'm saying? It's a selfish thing for bros to be like, don't go with the hoe. I know this is coming. You can do the chicks with dick things and fill in exactly the exact same thing I'm saying. This is not meant to be misogynistic. It's meant to be funny. The point is that he went off to go and, and marry Marina. The problem with that is he wound up killing Marina. Now, how did he kill Marina? Because she turned into the Leviathan. It was too big even for Namor. So he's like, hey, Dane, can I borrow that sword for a second? Yoink, thank you. And he goes and he kills her and hands it back, be like, thanks, it was fun. And then he's stuck with a blood curse because he just killed somebody, because the sword killed somebody, and Dane is the one who he's got to now purify the sword and purify himself in order to get rid of the curse, the bloodlust curse. So this changes all of that. You know what I'm saying? This changes everything. Maybe it's a way to try and fix the idea that Dane Whitman, for the most part, has just been a sheath. Every single time that you have a major story that involves the Ebony Blade, it's somebody else taking the sword and doing the killing. Even as recently as the most previous event that didn't really have any consequences or make a whole lot of sense, even though it made more sense than a lot of the events out there, and that's the War of the Realms, where at the end of the one Punisher story, he meets the Black Knight, and I'm like, I already know how this is going to end. He meets the Black Knight. This was under Jerry Dugan, if I remember correctly. And Punisher grabs the sword and he's like, oh, I'm here to pick that. Boop, okay, you do it back. And it's like, oh, okay, I got the sword. Okay, killed somebody. Doink, doink. Dane Whitman is just a sheath for the sword. He's the sheath. He holds the sword until somebody needs to use the sword to kill somebody. And then he has to go off and, do the expunging thing. Never like that. Never like that. Maybe this is going to fix all of that. But by making him a character who's got to embrace darkness in order to make the sword work, I'm not digging on that. I'm simply not. I want my characters to be good. I want my characters to be pure, at least to a little bit. This isn't a purity test, but you got a character who's essentially insane here. You realize that the narration is actually voices in his head. It's him doing this. He's crazy. I remember the story where he went crazy. I actually read the whole story. I think it was like 4 issues. I read the story, that Black Knight miniseries, because I was thinking about doing a spotlight and story of it. And I read it and I was like, I'm not going to spotlight and story this. This story sucks. I hated that story, So no, I'm not digging on this, man. In March, that's when the new comic book is supposed to show up, the Black Knight series. It's Psy. It's different artist, unfortunately, because the art in this book was spectacular. It's really cool. I dug on this a lot, you know, and I definitely want to see some more of Jesus Saez, right? Yeah, Saez. I want to see a lot more of him in the comic books. I mean, hello, Marvel, you got the best freaking artists in the world. Use them. Use them. So well, I'm looking forward to see that. I'm looking forward to see how they're going to change things. I hope they're not going to make it so that he's got to embrace his darkness and embrace his insanity because we've already got a Moon Knight. You know what I'm saying? We don't need Dane Whitman to be the new Moon Knight. That's just silly, you know? Anyway, tis what it is, man. And I think this comic book could have been a little bit better simply by not retconning everything. I'm so tired of retcons. Because when you retcon something, you got to be sure it's going to work. That's the thing about it. You have to be sure it's going to work. Because if not, what are you leaving for the next guy? So he just went and made Simon Spurrier, and the editors permitted it, you know, maybe even suggested it, make it so that the darkness actually comes from him, not from the blade. Okay. So now what about if that doesn't work? What if it doesn't generate sales for the Black Knight? Mind you, a character who's coming up in the Marvel Universe, the MCU, in the Eternals. I mean, is he going to be dark like this also? Or are you changing the character right before the movie comes out, which is always a dumb thing to do? He's gonna like if this doesn't work, where the character people are just like, I'm embracing this new darkness, version of the Black Knight. I like this. It's like, okay, cool. But if they don't like that, what's going to happen then? If the sales don't increase, in fact, it's another one of those failed things. What are you leaving for the next person? Who's got to be like, yes, it turns out it wasn't actually the darkness. It was my bent butt plates. That's what changed everything. Like, what are you doing at this point? You're making it very hard to bring the character back to the way that he was. So I don't know how I feel about this. I don't think this is necessarily going to work. I don't think that's going to make this character more impressive. I think that just simply writing about the character is what's going to make more people recognize how cool the character can be. Not writing like a crazy person, writing him the way that he was originally written back in the day, in the Avengers comics. But it's just my opinion. Anyway, guys, I can't say, like I said, I can't say that I hate this comic book, but I also can't say I necessarily love it either. There were some really great points to it, but it's one of those things where it's like the art was consistently good, and I could definitely say something good about that. Everything else about the comic book, including the title and the subtitle, very, very blasé on. And I got to see where this is going to go starting next month sometime. Anyway, guys, I'm out. Like the video, watch an ad. Professor Bill, Comic Book University. Class dismissed.